a lot of what I'm hearing here is also mindset. So how important, and a lot of people don't like talking about mindset, and they think it's a bit, oh, mamby-pamby. To be a winner, that difference from silver to gold and to achieve the things that you set out to achieve, in your own words, how important is it for us and people here today to be working on mindset?
Well, it's not really a difference between silver to gold. You've got to have a similar mindset to be at that sort of level. You've got to have an inner belief. But at the beginning of my career, it was being eliminated to being a gold medalist. Chalk and cheese in some ways. Of being told as a youngster that you're capable of doing that and believing that you can do it, you've got to be able to live that. And the problem is that every race you go and do, especially internationally, you're proving you're not at that level. And so you're always fighting to see how you can get to the higher level. But you have to have that sort of inner belief in some ways. Even though the team is more successful now, I think on an individual basis, they're probably not as strong as we were in 2000 and of the 80s, because one, we were doing it as a passion, we weren't doing it for finance. The athletes now are supported by the lottery. It's still not a huge amount of money, but they would be earning more in the marketplace than they would be out and that. But there isn't the love and the passion with the athletes now as there was. Is that we had a lot of athletes that would do 2, 3, 4, 5 games. We very rarely now have athletes that would do more than 2 games. It's a sort of stepping stone to something else. But even though they get more success than we did back in our day. But that mindset is that you've got to want to be a winner. You want to know that you've got to get there. And you've got to find a philosophy, a way of trying to achieve that. A good way of describing it and where sort of we moved to when Jürgen came over. When Jürgen first came over in 1991, the first thing he did was mark out the whole of the river in 250-meter pieces, but he also came out with gold times in each category of boat. I was rowing in the pair at that time, and the world record was 6:32, I think, and his gold time was 6:22, 10 seconds faster than anybody's ever recorded before. And that time that I told you about with Mike and Andy, where we broke the world record in training 2 weeks before the World Championships, we did a time of 6:24. So we were 2 seconds away from Jürgen's time that was 10 years on from where we were at that. So I could buy in. Most athletes think, that's ridiculous. You can't go that fast. But the gold times, as I said before, are an outdoor sport. So you've got to have the perfect conditions. For a small boat, like a single, pair, or double, you need a slight tail breeze, but not enough so the water gets rough. Because you're closer to the water. When the blades come out, you can hit the water, and that makes you unstable. And so you can't apply the power. For an 8, you can have almost a hurricane behind you. The water can be rough because the weight of the boats and the crew within it has momentum to keep going. So they can handle a lot more. So the gold medal times, very rarely you'll ever see get beaten at one time because it's only one condition. I think the World Championships in Seville in 2001, the small boats were first. It was a strong tailwind, but got stronger and stronger as the race is going. So it was almost perfect conditions every level from that. And so we have these gold times, and I could buy into that because I achieved rowing on our own pretty close to it. Most athletes couldn't do it and sort of didn't really buy into it at that point. But still now, all countries work to those gold medal times. They make up their own time, And it's that sort of process. And the best way I can describe that, and the story that I tell quite a lot, is about an American swimmer, a guy called John Naber, who went to the Munich Games in '72. He helped the relay team qualify for the final, but didn't swim in the final. You're allowed 6 people in a swimming relay team, and you can use those 6 if your country is strong enough. But it's the times in the heat that qualify for you the final. So if you're not fast enough, and if you've used your weaker athletes, so America at that time, they're still pretty strong now, but even stronger at that time, is that they probably had 10 athletes that could have qualified their relay team. But John helped the thing, and my Olympic hero, a guy called Mark Spitz, who then came into the final, won the gold medal. He won 7 gold medals at those games. Each one of those gold medals were won in world record time. And John was really proud of himself, of helping that team, but he didn't have the gold medal around his neck. And he said, 4 years' time, I want to win that gold medal in the relay team, but I want to give it a go in my individual event as well. His individual event was the 100 meters backstroke. So he came out of the Munich Games and he thought, how am I going to do this? And he looked back in the history books, and what he found is that every games, around the games, there was a new world's best time that was doing. And it was almost a steady line of improvement through games to games to games. And so he predicted a time of 55.5 seconds that was going to win the gold medal. The problem was his personal best at that time was 59.5 seconds. He was 4 seconds behind.
That's a lot.
Boy, it's a huge amount of swimming on your back in 100 meters of a pool. And he almost gave up the sport because of it, because I can't go 4 seconds quicker. It's impossible. And he actually then looked at it and thinking, I don't have to do that time today or tomorrow or even this year. I've got 4 years to do that. That's 1 second a year of improvement. That's still a big ask to do. He used to train for 10 months every year. That's 1/10 of a second in a month's training. Roughly 30 days in a month. That's 1/300th of a second he's looking for in a day's training. He used to train for 4 hours a day, every day. That's 1/1200th of a second. It takes an eye to blink 5/1200ths of a second. So he's looking for 1/5 of an eye blink in an hour's training. And that was his philosophy, how he was going to go about it. Obviously, you've got to look for that improvement of every hour, of every day, of every month, of every year. He got through to the games. He was part of the relay team. He did win the gold medal within the relay team, and he made the final of the individual events. Lined up against the 2-time Olympic champion, world record holder, Olympic record holder, was in the lane next to him. He won the gold medal in a time of 55.49 of a second. So by setting targets in some ways, we do a very similar way within our sport, but it's open up to the elements. It's not in a controlled environment. And so of taking that process of what seemed to be impossible, which he thought was impossible, but breaking it down in a different way, got through to that. The other side of that is that when I retired, I made an announcement at my retirement announcement that I was going to raise £5 million for children's causes in 5 years. Number 5 seems to follow me around quite a lot. So I came out with this random statement. And the next day I thought, God, why did I say that for? How am I going to go about that? Oh, the John Naber story. Let's think about breaking it all down. And started breaking it down into small chunks. And you work it out. And I only got a little way because you had to raise £20,000 a week, every week, for 50 weeks a year. So you're only having 2 weeks off of not hitting that target. And thought every time I saw a clock, everything was falling behind the targets. So using the John Naber story, but spinning on its head in some ways, is that we ended up having 5 really big events, and everything was worked towards that event to try and raise a lot of money. I got into the Guinness Book of Records for running the London Marathon. Not for the fastest time. It's closer to the slowest time than the fastest time. But I got in the Guinness Book of Records for an individual raising the most money for charity. That was 1.8 million that we hit.
Wow. That's incredible. I like
that record's been smashed several times from that. So it's another record that I've lost. But saying that, I was up at Glasgow last weekend with Chris Hoy, who's got terminal cancer, stage 4 cancer, and has started a cycle race. He's a really good friend of mine, and I went up to support him. He was hoping to raise £1 million, and it's at 2.3 at the moment, and hopefully that's going to become an annual event. So hats off for Chris of what he's doing and the conditioning he's doing now. Yeah.
Wow. I really like the way that you've broken this down. Setting micro goals, micro targets, small improvements consistently over a long period. That brings us on to Atlanta 96, which was legendary. That was your 4th gold medal. Now this is key. You famously said, if anyone sees me in a boat again, you've got my permission to shoot me. What was behind the raw emotion and what pain were you carrying at that time? And give us some context to that. And in that moment, was it? Did you really think that was it, done?
It's a bit of a long story, and some of my stories are long, so I apologise. Is that the World Championships the year before, that I'd been rowing with Matthew for 6 years, and one of our good friends who was a journalist, who was a former lightweight world champion as well, a broadcaster for the BBC, did an interview with Matthew, and it was the day before the final. So we just rowed the semi-final. He did his interview with Dan, and he came straight up to me and he said, "Dan says you're going to carry on after next year. You're going to retire, aren't you?" And I had to think pretty quickly on my feet and thinking, okay, if I say that I am going to carry on, that's going to play on his mindsets, because he's been my understudy, even though there's 2 of us in a boat, because everyone is sort of, you're going for your 4th when he was going for his 2nd, I'm going for my 5th, he's going for his 3rd. In any time, he's won 3 Olympic gold medals, but doesn't even get mentioned because somebody else in the crew is winning 5. And he was, by Sydney, he was the outstanding performer. So I said, yeah, no, I think I'm going to stop. I'm not quite so sure, but yeah. But as we got closer to the games, I remember in January of Atlanta year, we were in training camp in Australia, and Jürgen and I went out for a coffee, for a chat, and we talked about me possibly carrying on. The time it got to July when the games was, I was definitely going to stop. And as we crossed that line, the emotion that came out. Fortunately, athletics world championships going on at the moment. You'll see people giving interviews almost immediately as they've crossed the line. In rowing, you can't do that because we're stuck out in a lake. In Atlanta, you cross the line, you circle back round, and this happens at most internationals, world championships and Olympic Games. The next race comes down, you then circle into the podium and get your medal. So it's about 20 minutes after the finish of your race. And you haven't been able to even talk to your opposition at that point. And so there's still a lot of excitement going around. What they did at Atlanta, they put a landing stage in the water. So as you crossed the line, you went straight in and gave interviews. Never had that before in my life. And of course, they get a little bit more of raw interview, which is obviously what they're looking for. I used a 4-letter word beginning with F, which I shouldn't have used, and felt really embarrassed about it. It was interesting when we went to the studios in downtown Atlanta afterwards. The BBC were apologising for me for the 4-letter word that I used, and said we've been able to cut it out of all the highlights that would go out after that. And so that was a very much a learning curve as well. But at that time, we didn't know the British team wasn't performing very well. Quite often, there's only one gold medal, or we are the first gold medal in rowing over the 2 weeks of the Olympics. We're always in the first week, our finals in the middle weekend, and we tend to get more of our success in those days, if you can call it success, in the second week. But just emotionally, physically, I just felt under pressure the whole time on the build-up. The coming out of Barcelona with a new partner, with Matt Pinson, even though I've won 2 Olympics before, is that it was a new combination. I'd got ill leading into those games, and so it was touch and go if I was going to go. There were other things happening. For 4 years, Matthew and I had gone along to functions like this, and wherever we're going, oh yeah, on the 27th of July, we're going to win a gold medal in Atlanta. That's great motivation, 4 years, 2 years, 1 year out. When it gets into 3 months, 2 months, 1 month, counting down the days, that's a hell of a lot of pressure that's on your shoulders. And so you're dealing with all that. I've done a lot of mentoring for different athletes in the sport and other sports. One of the things that I can do is what athletes like is putting things into boxes. If you do this, this, and this, you're going to get this. Going to 5 games, winning gold medal at each one of them, everyone's been different. And so part of the freshness of mind is knowing that it's a new experience, and you've got to take that experience in that context at that time still to be able to produce the goods. That's not what athletes want to hear. They want to hear, well, if I do this training, if I do this and I do this, I'm going to get a gold medal. It doesn't happen like that. And so that I can talk from that sort of level on the mentoring that I do. But that's how I felt. My parents used to follow me around to most of the races I did. They went to all the Olympic Games. They did stayed in people's houses quite close to the course in Atlanta. And the day that they arrived, they got taken to the village hall. There were other people from different sports that were in families from the area. And my dad is as quiet as anything. He's never spoken in public at all. And they said, "Oh, that we've got some famous parents here that of Sheila and Jeff Redgrave. Their son's going for their 4th Olympic gold medal." And my dad has never shown any emotion. Unfortunately, he's not with us anymore. But he stood up, didn't really know what to say, and I was told that he burst into tears. And that's really an enlightenment of the pressure that's people around you that you don't see as an athlete. Getting married at my 2nd games and having a child through the games that I had, is that in Atlanta again, my wife's the team doctor, so she's with the team. We've been in a training camp in France. We've gone through a climate change in Canada before coming down to Atlanta. And the whole time we're telling the girls, my son wasn't born at that time, and saying that after Atlanta, we're going to go and see Mickey Mouse. We're going to go down to Florida, and that's what we're going to do the 2nd week of the games. And they accepted it. They sort of thing is that they came with us on the training camps, but of course they can't go into the Olympic Village. So they go with my parents at that point. And that 20 minutes that I talked about as you cross the line going back up is that we hadn't even got the medals around our necks. And the girls are saying, "When are we going to see Mickey Mouse then? When are we going? Are we going today?" It doesn't quite work like that. But that you don't really realize on that video, you see my eldest daughter, who was 9, of looking at where they were sat in the grandstand with my wife and family. They're looking at an angle to the finishing line, so they can't really see. And we won by 0.38 of a second. So it wasn't a huge margin that we won by. And my daughter thought we'd lost. Absolutely convinced we thought we'd lost. It wasn't until we got onto the podium that she accepted that we we won. She went to of a private school, which I always said I'd never send my kids to private school, but when you get to there, and fortunately I could afford it at the time, it was quite close to where we lived. The first year of girls who were at 11 and they board, my daughter won a scholarship to go there, so didn't have to board where most of the school did. The end of their first year, they had to write of their first experiences of their school, but also questions of which is your favourite place in the world, what have you done? And she's written in there is that favourite city is Sydney. Best time of my life was the games. I'm getting emotional now from it. And you're thinking, that's not what you see as an athlete. You're saying, when are we going to go and see Mickey Mouse? Not about of the experiences they have from it.
So having your family support, your wife, Lady Anne Redgrave, your children, I take as being just a huge, huge importance to you.